what I can see. This whole thing came out, it's never packed. That's the same thing. The experience from constipation. Yeah, exactly. Remember to speak up if you can.
Yeah. All right, everybody. I'm Dan Sky. I'm the executive. I was in that medication area. I am the executive editor of High Times Magazine, and boy, we have a great seminar panel for you today. I'm sure all of you have been wondering about dabs. That's the kind of a slang word for concentrates. How are they made? Are they dangerous? Are they absolutely perfect? We're going to answer some of your questions today. And I'm going to introduce the moderator of the panel. He's somebody who's been covering the dab scene since the very beginning, since the dawn of the dab, if you will. Senior editor Bobby Black. Everybody give him a warm hand.
Thank you, Dan. Hey guys, how you doing? How's everybody doing? You'll have to excuse me, I've been busting my butt out in the sun all day, so I'm a little out of breath. So I'm Bobby Black. I'm senior editor, as Dan Sky told you, and back in our February 2012 issue of this year, I did a feature called The Concentrate Revolution, which was about the dab phenomenon, which has been sweeping across the cannabis community for the past few years. It's still pretty localized to the connoisseur market. I think most stoners out in the country aren't too aware of it yet, but it's catching on fast. And so there's been some, controversy surrounding this issue because the concentrates BHOs, butane hash oil, is made with butane extraction. There are some people who are a little uncomfortable with it. They have some negative feelings about it because they feel it's like a little, not a natural process, or that it might be unhealthy. And on the other hand, there are people who, love to dab and who say, hey, it's not any more dangerous than any other form of ingesting and all that other stuff. So there's also possible PR issues that have been raised about it as far as how the public in general perceives how people smoke dabs and how they're made. So that's what we're trying to convene this panel for, is to try to address these issues. We want to dispel any unnecessary fears. We want to, or any myths, and we also want to honestly and openly discuss any possible dangers that may exist, whether it be in making it, which we know can be very dangerous, or also with ingesting it. So to that end, to have that open, frank conversation, we've assembled a really great panel here. Let me run down the line. First, right here to my left, someone who's been a little bit of a critic, I believe, of BHO. He makes only natural extracts, no butane. He's the owner of Essential Extracts of Denver, works with Pink House, and is the provider of award-winning high-grade solventless concentrates for over 2 dozen dispensaries. Please welcome Selecta Nicotine. Next to him, we have Dr. Alan Shackelford, a highly educated, experienced, and articulate advocate for medical marijuana, who's trained at Harvard Medical School, is a top physician at the Intermedical Consulting in AmeriMed, Colorado, and was recently featured in the Nat Geo Channel's American Weed program. To his left, we have one of the world's top experts on the biology of the cannabis plant and its effects on the human endocannabinoid system, which he kind of helped discover in a way. He's the Associate Professor of Biology here at the University of Colorado and President and CEO of Cannabis Science, Inc. Please welcome Dr. Bob Melamede. This well-camouflaged gentleman over here is William Breeds. He's the nation's first salaried medical marijuana critic and cannabis scene writer for Denver's Westward publication. He's the winner of NORML's 2011 Hunter S. Thompson Media Award for Outstanding Achievement in advancing the cause of ending marijuana prohibition, and you may have seen him on The Daily Show. So give it up for William Breeds. And finally, last but certainly not least, down on the end there, we have Big D Daniel DeSalle. I'm sorry, how do you say last name, man? Daniel DeSalle? Desai, my bad. He has a ton of experience making and providing BHO and other concentrates for patients, one of the proprietors of Top Shelf Extracts, Colorado's #1 wholesaler of medical marijuana cannabis concentrates, and winner of 3 High Times Cannabis Cup Awards and numerous other caregiver cups. So give it up for Big D. So before we get started with any questions and topics, I'd like to just open it up for each of you to make a statement up to maybe 2 to 3 minutes, brief, just telling people a little about your background and what your feelings are about what we're talking about. So we can, I guess we can begin.
All right, my name is Nick Tanum. I go by Selected Nicotine. And I've been making hash for about 10 years now. It's been a passion in my life. I'm also a DJ, thus the Selected Nicotine. And both these things have been extreme passions in my life, and I'm so stoked to be here doing exactly what I love doing every day, and that is providing medicine to the patients and providing music to the people. So I'm extremely stoked to be here. I make solventless hash for a living, and one of the first things I wanted to say is I'm definitely not against BHO in any way. Right now, it's such a new phenomenon that we really don't know if there are dangers to it, if there aren't dangers to it as well. So for me, it's just something, I prefer the solventless method. Number one, because I don't have to worry about any solvents being left over in my product. And number two, because this is what we prefer. We can retain terpenoids a lot better than most solvents, although there are a lot of amazing solvent extractions out there right now. And like I said, I really don't have anything against solvent extractions or BHO. This whole dab phenomenon is so new to all of us that I think we have a lot more research to do before we can even make a final decision.
I'm Alan Shackelford. I have been researching the medical literature, at least, on cannabis for a number of years, and in my medical practice, I've seen a number of patients who use concentrates of a variety of different extraction methods with great success for a number of different medical conditions. I also sit on the Colorado Department of Revenue Medical Marijuana Advisory Work Group, one of 2 physicians, and in that capacity we were tasked and have been and will be tasked with the safety of medical marijuana, both in the growth of the plant itself and in extraction methods. The rulemaking process that we engaged in this past year, and will be starting up again next week actually, has been focused from our perspective on providing or making sure that the products that are provided to the patients in Colorado don't cause any downside, have any negative effects. So to that end, we've looked at fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, extraction methods, any sort of chemical that might impact the safety of the cannabis in any form in which it's used. Concentrates can be provided in a variety of different ways, as you all know. Butane extraction is certainly one of them, and people have used other methods which are probably less safe. CO2 extraction is, of course, another which doesn't use any particular volatile solvent. The problem here is that we really don't know much about the product that comes out with any extraction method, be it CO2 or a volatile solvent. The analyses, the first, are difficult because the reference standards are difficult to find, and it's hard to really figure out exactly how they differ. The thing that's really important here is because we don't necessarily know what the specific impact on the cannabis is, we go back to looking at what the effects of the solvents themselves are, and we'll talk more about that in detail as this panel progresses.
So I've been a cannabis user since I was 16 years old, and you can clearly see the dangers of doing that. But the one thing that was always a constant, and it's been now, I'm 64, so I've been using it for a while, one of the things that bothered me for many decades really was I have very sensitive lungs, and smoking would really bother me. And it was a number of years ago that I basically, for the most part, gave up smoking at all and just turned to eating, whether it be brownies or cookies or raw bud or whatever. I was eating everything. And about a year or two ago, I became what I call a tar baby. So what I do is I eat extracts, CO2 extracts, ethanol extracts, butane extracts, and I think that they're all good for you, as long as you're not using anything that's bad. So if you have dirty ethanol and you do an ethanol extract, you're going to get a dirty concentrate. If you use dirty butane, which is available cheaper than high quality butane, then any residues that might be in there that are themselves not volatile will be left over. So it's with anything else, you know, what garbage in, garbage out, and put something good in, and what comes out is good. And just to argue a little bit with my buddy here, with my doctor, CO2 is an organic solvent that is volatile. That's why you use it. It's a 1-carbon organic solvent. Ethanol is a 2-carbon organic solvent. Propanol is a 3-carbon. Butane is a 4-carbon. Hexane is a 6-carbon, etc. So they're all organic solvents, and if they're dirty to begin with and you don't get rid of everything that was in them, then you have contaminants that you don't want to necessarily consume. So I think that's the bottom line. If you're doing any kind of extract and you've got pesticides or fungal contaminants, the fungi produce really nasty compounds, you know. So the key is start with good, clean stuff and use good, clean procedures to produce whatever you're producing, and then benefit from it.
I'm Will. I have really no idea why I'm here. I'm not a doctor. I don't make hash. But I have been around buying it and seeing and part of the scene for a while, and I think I've seen the progression of it, and that's why I was asked to be here. I really don't have a preference either way. I like my solventless. I like my solventless hash. I enjoy my butane extracts. I really like the ISO extracts that are starting to become big around. And I'm really here to sort of learn and probably sit back and not say much more. Thanks, guys.
My name is Daniel Pasai. I moved to Colorado about a year and a half ago now to make concentrates for one dispensary. In Los Angeles, I managed a few different dispensaries, and I had the chance to meet some really, really good hash artists out there. And I had the privilege of them teaching me quite a bit. So when I moved out here, I started doing it full time. I'm a big proponent of BHO because I've seen that, you know, as medicine, it both helps with harm reduction. It practically cures withdrawal symptoms in people that are, you know, alcoholics or addicted to speed or pharmaceuticals, and also pain management. I mean, I've seen it just make people's pain evaporate, and you know, they get up, they walk around, they feel way better. And also, I'm into the culture of it. I'm into collecting glass. I'm into making the best possible tasting concentrates I can as well, and appealing to the connoisseurs. Okay. I'm into making the best possible tasting concentrates as well, so that it appeals to the connoisseurs. And yeah, I'm 100% proponent of it. Thank you.
Okay, before we go any further, just by a quick show of hands, does anyone not know what BHO is or how it's made? Is there anyone that needs like a little quick primer on about it, or is everybody pretty much familiar with it? Okay, so we don't need to go through that. So why would a patient choose BHO over other delivery systems of cannabis that have been tried and true and may be in some people's minds less scary or less harmful or something?
Because it works every single time, and it's also possible to regulate your dosage a little easier. You know, you take a fraction of a percent of a gram, and you're fully medicated and you're exactly where you want to be. A lot of times with flowers, there's variations. So I think concentrates just help people lock it in better and treat themselves easier.
Now, we were saying that any possible dangers that you guys perceive as coming from smoking BHO would be due to the use of inferior butane, or what we would call a bad purge, an incomplete purge, right?
Well, or if you had solvents.
If you had, for example, pesticides on your plant material, that's going to come off into that solvent. So when you evaporate the solvent, you'll actually be concentrating those things, and that's the real danger. You know, pesticides are typically extremely nasty in how they can affect your nervous system and potentially your immune system. So you definitely don't want to ever be consuming that, which is another reason why not only with the cannabis products you consume, but with your food in general, you should be conscious about what you're eating, because if you're not eating organically produced food, which is not always easy to do, or if you're eating hormone-treated meat, you're basically voting for that kind of process because you're buying it. If nobody buys it, nobody will make it. So it's the same thing with your cannabis as well. Know what you're doing. Have some basic understanding of reality. Learn some science and learn about your health and what you should be doing to improve your health.
Yeah, and there's so many other variables too, other than even the pesticides used or the quality of the butane used. So many other variables, even to go as far as if people are processing fresh material, but they don't know how to completely process fresh material compared to dry material, they're going to have dangers of leaving butane in. They're going to have other dangers, dangers of having too much plant material come in, being way too harsh on the throat. So there's just so many variables, I think.
Well, there are a couple of things that enter into this picture. One of them is whether or not residual hydrocarbons like butane are dangerous. And there isn't any evidence and I looked through the National Library of Medicine database on this, there isn't any evidence that small amounts of residual butane are problematic. Now, in high concentrates, butane or any of these volatile substances are potentially fatal. And if people do using concentrating butane in a balloon, for example, and what's the term? Inhaling it, there's another term for that. But no, helium, yeah, a whole different matter, but that's oxygen deprivation. Well, that's oxygen deprivation, though. And in fact, that is the point. Oxygen deprivation, when you're inhaling concentrated hydrocarbons like butane, you displace the oxygen just like helium. And of course, the butane goes into solution in the fat cells, so it hangs around for a while. But there isn't any evidence that butane or heptane or hexane or any of these other substances are dangerous in trace amounts. So, at least according to the National Library of Medicine database. If it's there in higher concentrates, then we have a whole different discussion. The other side of this that's important is the question of smoking. Now, there is evidence that, very good evidence, that smoking marijuana does not harm the lungs. And I'm quite sure that smoking concentrates, hash oil, does not harm the lungs either. It's an irritant, but that's about as far as it goes. The thing that's really important is that as temperatures are elevated above about 400 degrees Fahrenheit, you begin to destroy many of the physiologically active cannabinoids that you find in both botanical plant material marijuana and concentrates, regardless of how they're concentrated. So there are other things to discuss with regard to smoking or heating it up beyond about 400 degrees, but they don't really, it's more a question of efficacy of its effect and its use as opposed to dangers.
So you're saying in trace amounts it's not, but what if someone is a somewhat abusive dabber? What if they're dabbing all day, every day? Does it then become an issue?
I think it depends on how much they're using, as you said, but we don't have much data on it. And so, as always, when we don't have a whole lot of data on it, it's best to err on the side of caution. Meaning, if we don't really know, and it's hard to say exactly how much somebody's using if they're consuming a given amount, and we could test this, it just hasn't been done yet. A given amount on an ongoing basis, is there any particular danger? If we don't really know, it's best to avoid something. But the way that the way it's produced And the way that, as Dr. Melamede said, the way that it's produced and the quality of the materials used, in particular, the quality of the raw material that you're extracting from, has a huge impact on the final product and its safety.
And also, we got to take into account that this, the technique for making BHO has been around since about the year 2000 in Canada, and the way everybody learned about it in the U.S. was over the internet. So people have been dabbing and dabbing heavy for decades, and there haven't been any real problems reported yet.
Well, I actually know someone who had a problem that was dab related. She's actually here in the audience. If she was, I'd like you to just say real quick. She had an issue where she was dabbing and she had to be taken to the emergency room, and almost could have had a fatal accident. So I would just like her to really briefly, in a few sentences, tell us what happened to you. This is Jessie, everybody.
Like the doctors up there are saying, I went to the hospital because I had something they call epiglottitis. It is when the little thing in the back of your throat.
Speak up.
Oh, there we go. My epiglottis in the back of my throat swelled up, and it was from an irritant kind of passing over the back of my throat. It was an undefined irritant. It's unknown if it was from the product or from butane itself, like either the weed that was used to make it, but it I was at a stage where basically I saw a glowing nail, and I took it, and I took the dab. It wasn't anything I had made, and it wasn't anything that I really knew where it came from, and so that was a big problem. And I think that it's really important for people to just know where it came from. We're used to that with weed. We don't just take a bowl and smoke it. We say, is this, what is it? Was it organic? And we need to do that with whatever type of concentrate we're using. And I think that I think it's evolving, so that maybe we need to look more into the science of it and everything, but I really think that dabbing shouldn't be avoided, really, because I think it should be researched, and it shouldn't be criticized. It should be looked at better, and I think that's important.
Thanks, Jessie. So what she said was, basically this flap of skin that separates your esophagus from your trachea in the back of it was inflamed, and this can happen from irritants, it can happen from infections, it can happen from heat sometimes, and I'll let the doctors address this because I'm not a doctor, but if it happened to her, that means it could happen to someone else, and if it was the butane that caused it, then this is a possible danger, because if she hadn't been taken to the hospital quickly enough, she could have died. And if this is something that isn't particular just to dabbing and it was just a fluke thing, then that's great. But if this is something that can happen to a lot of people on a regular basis, then it's something that we need to raise awareness about, because the first time some poor person does a dab and drops dead, it's going to be very bad for the whole scene and for the legalization scene in general. So, doctors, would you guys like to address this?
Yeah, I'd like to, because I think it's highly unlikely that that had anything to do with the butane. Cannabis itself is an anti-inflammatory, so there had to be something else going in there that was pretty nasty with respect to how her body responded to it. And it could be, there are people who are developing allergies who work in the grow rooms. So she might have had a particular allergy to something that was concentrated. It could have been contaminants in the product itself. I'd say the least likely of all was that it had anything to do with the butane. And we are making concentrates from all of these other things. Ethanol is itself a poison. The amount that you'd ever have left over is never significant enough to have a real effect on you. And I think the situation with butane is very comparable to that. You're not going to get enough butane by whatever is left over, from what I know, to ever be a problem. And it does evaporate pretty easily. Just heat it up, even with boiling water. You're not going to necessarily alter other things, but you would tend to evaporate most of that butane.
Yeah, the temperature of the evaporative temperature of butane is extremely low. And so if you're heating it up and it's vaporizing or being burned, that butane is pretty much gone. Any residual would not be a problem. So I completely agree with Dr. Melamede that There may well have been other concentrates, as we said earlier, possibly pesticides or herbicides or something else that were concentrated by the extraction method. And maybe it was a function of just temperature. You can actually get epiglottitis from coffee if you drink it or swallow it incorrectly. So, you know, there are a lot of different things it could have been. I very much doubt that it was the butane itself, or probably the concentrate itself at all, but something else, some other factor. So I don't think that necessarily is a negative about using butane extracted concentrates.
I've had extracts that people have given me that I literally threw in the garbage. So it really does depend on what you're getting and how it was made, whether it was made from, you know, bud or crap leaves that had no trichomes. I mean, you got a whole spectrum there of what people are going to do to try to make money, unscrupulous people who we don't want to support in any fashion. If I can make one other comment, I periodically do smoke the tar, as I call it, and what I found to be very effective is if you have just like a small pipe and you got a nice clean screen and it's not a pipe that you know, so it's a glass pipe, it's all nice and clean, and if you just leave the carburetor open, if it's got especially a big carburetor, you leave that carburetor open and you put the lighter on it, take one big hit, and it'll all melt and evaporate without really burning because you have enough air coming through it. And I find that to work very effectively and to be actually quite mild on the throat because you're just bringing in so much air, and it's very effective.
Great. Well, it's very comforting to know that you guys, I feel a little more at ease that it wasn't necessarily dabbing that did that to her. It was just some factor that didn't pertain to the BHO. That's comforting. So I guess the problem with safety with BHO then is really just about the purity. It's about the purity of the butane and the quality of the purge and the quality of the material you start with. So let me ask the guys who make the stuff, as a consumer looking for this, as a patient looking for this, how can you be sure, what are you looking for to know that the stuff you're getting is pure enough to smoke?
The best thing to do is to actually go through the process of smoking it, heating up a time nail or a coarse nail, which is how most of us, you know, most patients do consume BHO. If it makes a sound, then you know for sure, it makes a crackling sound, you know for sure it's dirty because there's butane left in it, and the heat is converting the butane into CO2, to water and hydrogen. So, water and CO2, excuse me. So, it makes a sizzling sound like it would if you had water in a skillet with some oil.
Wouldn't another variable with the sizzle, couldn't that possibly be trapped moisture as well?
Yeah. It's a possibility, but you know, if you're vacuum purging it, then there's no chance that it's trapped moisture.
I believe there is, even in a vacuum, especially here in the altitude, because a lot of people are playing around with this whole phenomenon of vacuum purging, but they don't know all the details to what they're getting into. People are getting vacuums and pumps and chambers that aren't completely sealing, or they're not getting strong enough of a vacuum here in the altitude. And I've even seen, you know, some material that we've been playing around with still crackle after just having water stuck in it from the vacuum chamber and everything.
Me personally, I wouldn't take the chance. If it's sizzling, then there is a problem with the technique of the person who's making it.
Yeah, whether water or butane, there's something left that you don't want in it.
Yeah, and if they couldn't keep the water out of it, like I don't know if I'd trust their extraction skills.
I think the biggest concern, though, once again, is the quality of the marijuana and who's been growing it and whether they've been using pesticides or not. And I personally would not use cannabis products that I didn't know who produced it and or have it properly analyzed. And you can analyze not only for THC and CBDs and CBNs and blah, 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 you can also analyze for mold and pesticides. And we have to really be demanding quality product, not supporting garbage.
Since Will has tested and sampled a pretty broad range of different products, perhaps, and I don't mean to step into the moderator's seat here, but I would like to know if you have, what you've encountered in sampling some of the different concentrates.
Thanks, Doc. No, I've seen a wide range. There's stuff that, like Dan said, I'm not even hitting. I'm just heating up the nail and dabbing it on there to see the reaction. Because from the look of it, it's very viscous. I like to say it looks like used 40 weight motor oil in some of these places. For those of you who change your oil. So yeah, it's really gross. Thankfully, we've seen a lot of progression. I'm starting to see a lot better wax around the shops and around the community. And I think, Dan touched on this a little bit earlier. The one good thing about this is people aren't necessarily keeping their secrets under their hat, and people are talking about this, and it is a progression and a movement in this concentrate that people are sharing, trying to find the best way to get it right. And so if you want to do it right, the information's out there, which makes it actually even worse when you see people doing it really wrong.
The one thing I want to mention, I kind of keep hearing this theme, is that Dr. Bob over here is saying that he only trusts getting medicine from people that he knows. Other people are saying that it has to be done properly, and this is the biggest issue that I'm seeing, is that it is still so new, and there's 90% of the people that are playing around with these solvents and doing these extractions that don't know how to do it properly, especially when it comes down to different strains. And the different strains are going to have different variables. We continue to run into this, and I've been doing this for 10 years, and I still learn every day. Certain strains are going to retain those solvents a lot better than other strains. Certain strains are going to be a lot easier to pull off all the solvent immediately, whereas other strains are going to take a lot longer. And there's so many people out there that are doing the same process for the strains that take little time to pull the solvent off as they're doing for the strains that take a lot of time. And so this is, to me, one of the big issues, one of the big themes that I keep saying is that, this is a new phenomenon. And like I said, I don't have anything against it. I just want to see more research done. I want to see the longevity of it.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and that the fact that there hasn't been medical studies done, and how can we go about getting medical studies done when, so far up until recently, the government has not really made marijuana research very, easily accessible. Is it possible in Colorado or in California or some medical state to start conducting these studies and start conducting these clinical studies and getting this information?
We can't do clinical studies on marijuana in the United States with any ease at all. They have to, clinical studies that are truly clinical studies where you're actually providing a particular substance to a group of subjects and comparing it to a placebo, require, if it's marijuana, the approval of FDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and the DEA. And to get the three of them to agree on a marijuana study, and you have to use the marijuana provided by the University of Mississippi in Oxford. So, which has been described by, yes, horrible, very bad quality.
You get a spectrum of stuff there. He just gives out the chunk. Well, to the medical patients.
I'd like to know what he does with the good stuff.
Obama gets it.
Cool. Well, Dr. Bob knows Dr. El Soli, and I think that's pretty cool. And one of these days we'll go down and see him, will we not? Okay. I think the thing that's really important, though, on this is that House Bill 1043 that was passed last year in the legislature does provide for a research and development activity in Colorado. We have not yet met in the Department of Revenue to come up with the rules which will govern how that particular clause functions in the real world. And there are some big unknowns, the biggest of those being whether or not DEA and NIDA and FDA will let us actually do anything that even borders on being a clinical trial. The attitude was well reflected by a statement by Shirley Simpson, a spokeswoman for NIDA in the New York Times in January of 2010, when she said, as the National Institute on Drug Abuse, we generally do not fund studies that might show medical benefit to marijuana. That's kind of a paraphrase. But the problem, and you can kind of understand that because there's the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and their focus is on negatives, if any. But the problem is that NIDA funds 85% of the world's research into substances like marijuana. So it's extraordinarily difficult to do unbiased, proper clinical trials in the United States. Whether they're going to be done elsewhere, it's a question of money.
I'd like to just add a little more on to that, though. Cannabis Science is working with a group in Boulder that specializes in going through the FDA, designing the clinical trials, et cetera. And they're very confident that we're going to be able to do that either on a national level or within Colorado. And we're proceeding with that to go to sometime within the next few months to the National Institute of Health, to what they call a pre-IND meeting, where basically the NIH tells you, the FDA tells you what you have to do in order to accomplish your endpoint. So they're actually quite confident. If you go to our website, cannabisscience.com, you'll see the results of topical cannabis application to some really severe squamous cell carcinomas that are aside from totally disgusting, are mind-blowing in how the effectiveness there is. One of the two patients has now been biopsied as clear, and the other one has gotten rid of about 80% of a tumor that extended about 3 inches off the top of his head. And after 135 radiation treatments and chemotherapy, they were told there's nothing they could do other than to cut off his scalp and a good piece of his skull. And now the cannabis is working remarkably on it. So we think that a lot of the human data that we're able to generate is profound enough for things where there really are no alternatives, that the government hopefully will actually listen.
Well, it's gratifying to hear that there's some good progress being made. So thank you for that.
Just briefly, those are observational studies. It's a kind of one-off. You look at what someone is doing and see what the effect was, and those are okay. We can do those. We can't do the organized clinical trial yet, and it would be lovely if that works. I am on Cannabis Science's medical advisory board and privy to a lot of this. It's really quite remarkable. But again, those are one-off, and they suggest places we can go with the research. We just need to either be completely in the closet with it, which is not a great way to do it, or go through the proper channels to get it done correctly, and that's what Cannabis Science is now doing.
So I want to go back to a point that you made, Nick T, which is that you were talking about how you because this is so new, you just don't know necessarily what you're getting, and some people who are making it don't really know what they're doing. And I think one of the biggest dangers, aside from what the perceived dangers were of ingesting the butane or the BHO, is the making of it. The making of it can be very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. And I think part of the biggest problem, not only with physical danger, but with the perceived PR problem, is sort of a bathtub gin situation, where you have people who have no experience whatsoever in making concentrates, trying to make it at home, and blowing themselves up, blowing up their apartments and things, because they don't take the safety precautions and take the risk seriously. So, and that's why the term has ended up being called blasting. When you're blasting flowers, it's because, you know, it's an unfortunate nickname in a way, because some people have blasted the refrigerator doors off their refrigerators while trying to make it. So, knowing that this is probably the biggest danger involved in it, we at High Times discourage all of our readers from making BHO themselves. Our opinion is that you should go to, if you're in a medical state, you should go to a dispensary that you trust, who has someone like these gentlemen who know what they're doing, who are supplying pure product, who are supplying well-made product. But of course, that doesn't mean that most of the people in the country are going to follow that advice, or people who don't live in medical states that want it are going to try to do it. And like I said, High Times discourages that activity, but at the same time, we know people are going to do it, and we're concerned. So, I mean, what advice can we give would-be, you know, blasters, you know, to do it right if they're going to do it, and to be safe? What, guys, if you have anything to offer?
If they're going to do it, they have to do it outside. Every one of these people that blew themselves up did it inside, when either it wasn't fully purged or they actually just blasted inside. There's two ways to go about using butane to extract, like an open system, where you take a tube, you fill it with trim, you stick a can of butane on one side and it falls through a coffee. Oh, sorry. Where you just fill up a tube, glass or stainless steel with trim, put a can of butane on one side, and then filter it through a couple of coffee filters into a pan where you purge it. That's the open system, and people were doing that inside and blowing themselves up. The other way, you can get a machine that actually recycles it, and that's a lot safer, but you still have to be in a low ventilated area.
The other thing that's important is, as Dan mentioned, is to use glass or stainless steel. Do not use PVC piping. This butane extracts all kinds of stuff, and you don't want polyvinyl chlorine in your extracted concentrate. In addition, in the rulemaking of the Department of Revenue, which governs, of course, dispensaries, not caregivers or private individuals, we debated long and hard about how to to regulate the extraction method using butane or other volatile solvents like that with explosive danger. And we didn't actually impose a particular rule, but we probably will this year, simply because those dangers do exist, and you'll have to either use a closed system, which accumulates the butane, or an exhaust hood and a number of different things. And one of the rules that was imposed this past year was the use of food-grade plastic to do water or bubble hash extractions, because even that can, if you're just using something, the orange bucket you bought at Home Depot, you're likely to extract unwanted chemicals from the plastic. So there are rules that are in place about this, and you have to use your head. I mean, you can't just, expect that your homeowner's insurance is going to cover you if you blow up the neighbor's house.
Just a quick question. What can possibly leach from, say, your Home Depot bucket just using ice and water?
Well,
Out of curiosity.
I don't remember precisely what all the chemical substances were. There are hardeners in the plastic the rules governing industrial plastics do not exclude the use of dangerous products that food-grade products are not allowed to use. So whatever they may be. I mean, just assume that if it's an industrial product, there's going to be stuff in it that it doesn't matter if it gets into the concrete. It matters if it gets into your hash.
Okay, so you're saying that a food grade plastic wouldn't leach?
That's less so, yeah. I think Dr. Bob's right.
Less so.
Less so. The plastic is always going to be a potential problem.
Yeah, no, it's
And
always
so
been scary for me.
you want to use something that's more inert than plastic, like glass or lab grade steel, stainless steel.
I mean, if you ever just left your water in the car, in a hot car, and then drank it, it's quite disgusting.
Definitely the heat. I just haven't heard of it with
Yeah.
cold temperatures.
Well, it's going to just change the rate at which it'll come out.
okay.
Like for example, I only carry a glass jar around for water because I don't like the idea of what comes out of plastic, and I don't like the idea of making all that plastic and then disposing of it all. So again, we have to think about the world we live in and what we should be doing to make it better, not worse.
Fully agree.
And as far as, again, going back to the idea of the home BHO maker, just to clarify, what level of butane needs to be used? Obviously, there are different levels. They don't want to use the plain butane that you buy to fill your big lighter. You want to get something that's, like quadruple refined or better? Is that what the standard would be?
I personally use Vector 5X, and I'm in the process of switching over to pure N-butane. I think that's ultimately the goal, because there's 1 part in a million of sulfur, and that's the worst thing in it.
That's not bad.
But that could, potentially pose another danger. Is you just asked him how many times refined. There's all these companies coming out of Korea now and other places that are saying it's 5 times refined, it's 3 times refined, and who really knows how many times they refined it and what type of refinery process that they're using. So their 5 times refined may not be as clean as, say, Calibri's 3 times refined.
You're completely right. That's why
So there's no across-the-board standard for purity.
I go to the knowledge base that's online right now. I mean, it's really extensive, and they tested every single one. And the standard test is they'll spray a can in an empty pan and see what's left behind after. And so far, Vector, Calibri are the 2 choice brands to use for making BHO.
You could also get laboratory grade product at our science supply house. The cost differential, yeah, it's huge. The cost differential could make the difference, and though again, if it's a dispensary level type product, you want to be able to assure the patients who are using that product that it's been done under the cleanest possible conditions with the highest possible quality of materials.
Now let's say they have good starting material, they have good flowers, they get the right kind of butane, a good quality butane, and they're doing it in a safe way. Now they're at this stage where they need to purge. What are the different ways of purging? Which is the safest? Which is the most effective? And how do you purge well so that it's done right and clean at the end?
If I was doing a home run or something, I guess I would make sure that I blasted into a pan that was already floating in warm water, or like hot water, to where you put your finger in it and you'd have to pull it out after a second. So then I'd blast into that. you basically see it all bubble away and evaporate, and what's left over are big, thick bubbles, which you then have to pop. And it'll usually take about 2 or 3 water changes until you can actually, take it inside, because there's not enough butane left in it to do anything. And once you're in there, like some people would actually do it on their stove. I never would, but I use a different heat source just to keep it about 110, 120. And if I want to make butter, I'll whip it. If I want to make shatter oil, I'll put that in a vacuum purger.
And I don't remember what I was just gonna say. What are some of the dangers that people have to look for in regard to possibly igniting the BHO while they're doing this process? Because I know some people would think it's just an open flame, but there are other things that can cause it, right?
Yeah, static electricity could possibly cause it. But I think Denver might be actually one of the more dangerous places to make it, because our humidity is so low, especially during the summer. But I haven't had a single accident. We basically just, try to be as well ventilated as possible, be outside.
But, these dangers are real, and we do need to talk about these dangers, because people are blowing themselves up in their homes every single day, and it is a serious issue. So if we are going to continue doing this, which I'm sure we are, we're going to continue charging forward, we need to definitely take into account all the safety precautions needed for this process.
And that kind of brings us to the last topic, the last big topic, which is the PR, the perception, the public perception of blasting and dabbing and stuff. Now, this stuff hasn't really hit the mainstream media yet. They're not really too aware of it. But, some people, I know Normal Radio's Ross Belville wrote an article about it, I believe called The Danger of Dabs, that had a lot of dabbers, getting defensive about. And what he was just trying to do, I believe, is just, raise the idea that, look, I don't believe this, but there are people out there in the mainstream that are going to see kids with blowtorches. They're going to see kids smoking cannabis in a way that makes it look like hard drugs, and that is going to be detrimental, could be detrimental to the cause of legalization, which right now is enjoying a great swell of momentum forward, where pot is finally being considered more normal and not so scary. And there is that danger that maybe some parents or somebody might start getting scared by it again. And I'm curious to hear some of your thoughts, and maybe we'll start with you, Will, since you're a reporter and you've deal with the media a lot. How do you feel about this issue?
We're trying to scare you as bad as we can. No, I feel like you do bring up some really good points. I think the flip side is the people who are going to be scared of that and be turned off by that probably would have been turned off by cannabis in the first place, and they probably weren't as open-minded as they thought they were. I don't know, this hypothetical person. But the flip side of that is, yeah, the first time someone who's never seen anyone take a dab sees you with a blowtorch heating up a titanium nail and dropping a little chunk of wax on it, their reaction is usually pretty blind-eyed. And the following question is usually, what the hell did you just do? So it sort of helps to break that down and give them a dab and show them that it's not harmful. I don't know, it's just a progression. I feel like maybe people got scared when glass pipes became big and head shops became big, and there's always going to be something to scare the people who will be scared by this. And everyone else, I think, is moving forward. We're looking at it as a new way of medicating, and that's all I gotta say.
Is there any way to possibly minimize the damage of that perception, do you think? Because I think any reasonable person, if you spoke with them about it, you could explain to them and they wouldn't be scared by it. But we all know that a great deal of the American population is not very reasonable, and that the forces that are against us, that have always been against us, will latch on to anything they can. I mean, the Partnership for Drug-Free America, DARE, Just Say No, all those things have existed for a long time. And they basically use misinformation and propaganda this whole time. And they're losing, and they've been losing now for a while. But what can we do to not hand them a new weapon that will be used, that will be more effective against us?
Well, I think that's where, your magazine and I guess our coverage kind of comes into play, and it's just being honest about it. We've talked about in Westward, you know, and just being honest. I did a post with both of these guys in it, talking about their methods, what they do, just to bring some transparency to people who aren't, you know, the internet cannabis type, like like a lot of us are. And it's really just being honest about it and showing it in a positive way. You know, like Dan said earlier, it's really powerful stuff, and there's definitely people using it recreationally, and that's wonderful. But medically, these concentrates are very beneficial. For someone who's really sick, if you're battling nausea, for example, sometimes smoking a whole joint, choking down a whole joint, isn't what you want to do. Vaping one little hit of oil or solventless wax is just so potent all at once, such great medicine. You talk about that. That's how we need to bring it to the public and stop people from being so scared about something that it's just coming from the same plant.
Cannabis deficient people naturally exist. Half the population is above average, half the population is below average. That's a reality, a simple, unavoidable reality. And the unhigh people suffer from excessive paranoia and fear and negativity. And the only way that they're going to ever, the thing that's going to change them is the fact that cannabis cures and helps with so many different diseases. It doesn't cure everything, but it certainly helps with so many things, because in essence, really, it has to do with evolution and where our inflammatory thermostats are set. Historically, we died young and we died from infection. Now we're living longer and we're dying from age-related illnesses where they're all driven by inflammation. So we need to change that thermostat setting. And the way your body does that is through the endocannabinoid system. So what I'm simply saying is that cannabis is really an essential nutrient for modern man. And as the truth of the nutritional deficiencies that are seen in all the age-related diseases, heart disease, arterial sclerosis, cognitive dysfunction, Alzheimer's disease, all the autoimmune disease, and cancer, cannabis is beneficial for every one of them. And all but the hardcore, totally knocked out people who have no cannabinoid receptors, they will understand that as time goes on and as they see their friends and their neighbors benefiting.
And if you look at the movement forward in states that are proposing new medical marijuana legislation, Connecticut, of course, is one, and I was recently there and testified at the Judiciary Committee hearings on this, on their bill. And as people in these different states begin to increasingly pressure their legislators to pass medical marijuana legislation, and they begin to use it, and their neighbors, as Dr. Bob said, begin to see that they're benefiting from it, they'll begin to change their attitudes about the different dosing forms, and that's really what we're talking about. And there are, even in conventional pharmaceutical medicine preparations, different strengths, different concentrations. We have Vicodin. By the way, the United States consumes 98% of the world's production of Vicodin, the world's production of Vicodin, and about 40,000 people die every year from overdoses of that stuff. And that has to fuel the discussion as well. And you could take a little bit of botanical marijuana, smoke that or ingest it, and a little bit of a highly concentrated extract of marijuana and ingest that and not have a death, which is remarkable. And that is exactly the kind of gradation of treatment that we have with cannabis. We can use the equivalent of a very low dose of narcotic, which has a certain effect, and we can go all the way up to Phoenix tears, not to use that particular term, but highly concentrated extracts, and have a different effect. And it's no different, frankly, than what we see in pharmaceuticals, where we can use a whole different range of strengths, dosing intervals, and combinations of different medications to treat certain problems. We can do precisely the same thing with cannabis and all of its different dosing forms. So when people understand that butane extracted hash oil or any of these other concentrates, tar, or any of these others are simply a different way of addressing a medical problem using a compound that's specifically formulated for that particular use, those attitudes will change dramatically.
So basically, we should just say to them, relax, bro, it's just a blowtorch. Okay, before I open everything up to questions, I'd like, if you guys would like to make a final comment at all. Do you have any closing comments or?
I would like to make one because I think there's a fundamental concept that's worth every one of us understanding. The fact that half the population has more cannabinoid activity regulating open-mindedness and other good things versus the other half that lacks those qualities. It's the other half that's made the laws. It's the other half that are essentially infringing on our rights as human beings. And it's really a fundamental case of discrimination that we know is illegal. If our biochemical differences make us black or yellow or red or white, then we say we can't have discrimination. But if you can't see those differences and they manifest themselves in whether or not you like cannabis or not, because the people who are more endowed with cannabinoid activity are the people who are more likely to use it. They're more likely to experiment to begin with. They're more open-minded. The more you become essentially evolutionarily advanced, that's more cannabinoid activity. That's what evolution has given us. So we're being discriminated against by basically the backward-looking people, the cannabinoid deficient people, and it's a fundamental human right that we're being denied. And everybody should remember that, because that's how we have to turn this over in the end. We have a fundamental human right to modify our biochemistry in a fashion that nature has chosen to give us all of these benefits from.
I also think it's important to remember that butane is already used in several things you can buy, like hairspray, PAM. It's used to extract flavor. So that's already around. And I think as far as the PR goes, people more and more are using vape pens and e-cigs basically to smoke their oils. So that's that I imagine would be more socially acceptable than a blowtorch and a tie nail.
The one thing that I think we all can agree on here on this panel is that concentrates are good. Correct? The one thing that I would like to address, though, is why even go towards the dangers of using a chemical solvent that is volatile when we can make a really extremely similar process that has a similar taste, a similar appearance, a similar smell, if not stronger, not using chemical solvent methods of extraction.
I think that's correct, but I think it goes back to there are certain uses for certain types of products in given situations. I'll give you an example. Topical cannabis extracts are extraordinarily effective at treating localized pain, muscle spasms, and a variety of different other conditions, skin eruptions and things that we, cancers, as Bob says. And they're not absorbed. We don't have a whole lot of psychoactivity from them. They don't show up positive in urine tests unless there's some on your fingers and you miss. It's a remarkable opportunity, and I think that the concentrates can be quite successfully used there as well. Remember that if we're talking about medical cannabis use, we have all these different options for different conditions that vary from person to person. So there isn't necessarily one method that's superior to another. There's a variety of different things available, and there should be. And personal preference or personal experience should also dictate what someone uses to treat a given medical condition.
William, anything else? Any final comments?
No, these guys have said it all so brilliantly, the doctors, and then both of these guys make such great concentrates. So it's nice to have people like them on the scene making such high-level stuff, and I'd like to see more of that, those of you out there making bunk cash. So, that's it, I guess.
Everybody give it up for our panel, please. Thank you guys so much. I think this has been very enlightening. And before you go, what we're going to do is we're going to open it up to some questions from the audience. If you have a question, could you please step up to the front, and I'll be happy to hand down a microphone. Any questions or comments at all?
I want to ask about how somebody was telling me about people who are doing like a cool gram of wax, and if they don't heat the nail up enough, they start to put like a film in their lungs and things like that. I just wonder if you guys knew anything about that, heard anything about that.
I've seen videos. I have, and I don't think so. Like I've seen people, consistently do 0.5 hits, half-gram hits, and not have any adverse side effects. I mean, it's the same as weed. It's just more concentrated, way stronger.
Well, it's got less plant material, so it's, if you want to get a particular therapeutic dose or mental dose for whatever reason, you have to take in X amount. And if you take it in a concentrated form, you got less crap coming across.
And the only real negative would be just overdosing, which might make you uncomfortable for a while, maybe a little anxious or paranoid or whatever your individual response is. But as far as a long-lasting physiologic danger, I don't think so.
Do we have any data actually showing any scans of throats and lung systems of constant butane smokers? Because I personally, I want to see it. I've heard rumors, and so I'm not really going to talk on rumors. I just really would like to see some scans.
I don't think there are any. An MRI is, what, a couple $1,000? I don't think anybody's going to do that. And what we have to do is just kind of collect anecdotal responses. So if somebody does have a bad reaction, like the young woman who had that problem with her epiglottitis and went to the emergency room, reported to a dispensary, we actually ought to have some sort of adverse event reporting system in Colorado, and we don't yet. And I'm going to propose that at the Department of Revenue. By the way, the Department of Revenue is not the enemy. It may seem that way at times, but it isn't the Department of Revenue. The folks are actually quite supportive of the industry and want to see it succeed.
What's your name and what's your question?
My name is Brian. Thank you so much, first of all, being here. Also, my question is, assuming you can control the speed and the temperature, assuming you can control the temperature that you're extracting your oil with, do you think the speed at which you're removing the butane has a lot to do with the quality of the product? And then my second question is, do any of you guys know of the adverse health risks of oxidized titanium on a time hit?
Thank you.
Okay. First of all, as far as tie oxidizing, it's supposed to naturally change color like a little bit over time, but it's as far as I know, there's no adverse side effects to that. But if it was made with lower grade material or something, it could actually flake off. Like in downtown LA, they have a wholesale district that sells a bunch of them like that aren't grade 2 titanium, commercially pure. Yeah, you're not getting to a point where you hurt anyone. And I agree with you. I think that how fast you get that butane out of your concentrate matters a whole lot. One of the big problems I was having with closed systems was that it typically up to an hour to recover your butane from the product. So this whole time your product is the extract is sitting in butane, soaking in it. And if you leave extract soaking in water too long, it could cause the cell membranes to rupture. So yeah, definitely, I try to get it out as quick as possible.
Quickly to the titanium question, Dr. Melamede properly noted that it's in a lot of different things. It's in yogurt. Titanium oxide is a coloring agent. It's in sunscreen. It's out there. Whether there are any adverse effects, I don't think anybody really knows necessarily, but titanium is also most frequently used in implantable joint replacement devices and stuff like that. So probably not too much of a danger.
Yeah, just real quick, as far as the speed and the rate of the butane running through the product, I've actually noticed, I'm a solvent extractor, but I've had a lot of experience using chemical solvents over the years, and I've actually noticed that the size of the can will affect the rate of the spray of butane, and that's actually going to have an effect on your end product. So, just another variable to keep in mind.
What's your name and what's your question?
My name's Andrew, and thanks for being up there, guys. I think from a standpoint of where it could go, it sounds like it's all perfect. A real measurable place for strength, for people to use, that we could see not only based on strength, but how much they would want to use. They wouldn't have to smoke like large joints if they're end stage people and stuff. So everything sounds good, but on this other side, this is my first time hearing about it and just being a big stoner, and it's like, I'll tell you what, if a couple of kids get blown up making it incorrectly, or frankly, look, they use solvent extractions for everything. With Coke, whatever, they're using gasoline in the mountains, they're just doing something else in the lab. Same reason with opiums, right? We know why OxyContin really is just like heroin, right? So if you do it properly, it sounds clean, it sounds like everyone's all systems go. But if someone blows themselves up and then they show people lighting it with a crack pipe and stuff like that, and that catches the news, like that will definitely set us back. Let's not give ourselves, I mean, we're in a little bit of a bubble with that if you don't think that could happen early in.
Yeah, and that was the danger I was, yeah, that's the danger I was bringing up, is like, how damaging could this be?
Easily. I think we've seen that in news reports out of California, and maybe there's one out of Lakewood a couple of years ago. Breckenridge, thank you. I mean, it happens, and people do talk about it, and that's why I said the only thing you can do, I guess from our standpoint, is try and present the positive. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and argue that it doesn't blow up, that people aren't stupid. There's plenty of videos on the internet to prove that. So I think all we can do is be advocates for responsibility. So.
You can't legislate intelligence or responsibility, and that is one of the problems, certainly with the opposition, if you will. It's kind of we have to protect ourselves from ourselves, but you can't. I mean, it's exactly what happened with the attempt to ban edibles last year. You cannot legislate parental responsibility and trying to put away your edibles so your 4-year-old doesn't get into it. But thank goodness it's not often Vicodin, which would kill them.
Do you guys think that regular hash is different than the oils just because of the way people are consuming it, or it's what's actually in the concentrates? Because, you know, traditionally people weren't using a torch and a nail to get high.
Clearly, I think when you make the extracts with butane or other solvents, what you get as an end product is something that's creamy to some degree, unless, as opposed to hash, which is not creamy. So there's something fundamentally different. There's extra things coming out. I don't necessarily agree that you want to pass the butane through as quickly as possible, because the plant leaves and the plant material, aside from the oils, there's all sorts of compounds that can come out that probably, we don't know enough, have beneficial value. If you look at the difference between oil made from butane versus oil made from CO2, you can very visually see, you know, one is nice, clear-looking honey oil and the other is not. But we've got indications that there are differences in the effects, the pain-relieving properties, and potentially other important phenomena. So we don't really know any of this information at this point. All we know is that this plant is quite the magical chemistry set.
I think that's also just a matter of technology. Yeah, people haven't been smoking ice water hash on tie nails, but that's also because tie nails haven't been out. People have been smoking hot knives in High Times magazine for 40 years. And it's really the same premise there. I smoke ice water hash off of a tie nail all the time and really enjoy it that way, actually. But consistency-wise, obviously, I think there's some more plant material left behind, and that's just in the tests. You know, when you look at percentage of cannabinoids per weight, you know, you're pulling out more just straight THC, it seems, with butane, and with ice water, you've got a little bit more something else in there.
Well, I would
That's why I'm not a
disagree
scientist, though.
in that you're getting a lot of goodies that come out in those butane extracts, or solvent extracts along the line of which Rick Simpson originally did. I mean, to me, that in many respects is the best stuff, is to use a good organic solvent that's clean and pharmaceutical grade, and you get everything out of it. And, you know, try spreading hash on a skin cancer.
But didn't Rick Simpson originally tell people to use naphtha?
Yeah, but naphtha itself is not intrinsically a problem if you get rid of it all. Naphtha just is a combination of different hydrocarbons, whereas, for example, heptane or hexane are a single molecule species.
I guess I always heard that naphtha was a carcinogen. With the skull and crossbones on the, you know, the tin can that you can buy at your hardware store, it seems to scare me.
Well, it's because it's got other crap in it. Now, I'm not talking about, again, it goes back to, are you using something clean or not, or are you getting rid of it or not?
Fair enough. I just think that Rick Simpson did an amazing job in spreading the word that cannabis heals. And I give him a lot of credit for doing that. I think some of the ways that he went about it are a little scary to somebody like me just looking from an outside perspective, that he was teaching people to use a substance that most people think of as a carcinogen, something you can pick up at your hardware store.
Yeah, but you can pick up ethanol in your hardware store as well, and methanol as well, and it all depends on what's in it. You know, when these things are distilled and refined, what other stuff is coming across, and that's the critical part, I think. You want to always make sure you're using the best and it's not contaminated with crap.
For sure. No, I guess my only point is to say that not everybody in our industry, let alone the human population, knows to use the best. And that's what we need to do, is just educate them.
Education, natural
education.
selection.
A little both.
The traditional method for making hash goes back several thousand years in North Africa primarily, but probably anywhere that hash was made, and it's the gradually increasingly small sieves, right? So the trichomes ultimately are the only thing that ends up in the bottom there. But what we don't know is, first, what all number of substances, physiologically active substances, are in the trichomes themselves, probably 108 at last count, probably 85 to 90 that are unique to cannabis and others that are common to other plants. What we don't necessarily know is what other substances are coming out in the solvent extract, which are not in the trichomes. And that's where the research really has to point us. We need to be able to do analyses of not only the trichomes, but also the stems and the other part of the plant material, the bud in particular, or in this instance where we're just extracting from the bud, so that we know what the difference really is between, say, CO2 extracted, which is this clear honey stuff, and the butane extracted concentrates, which are typically dark. Is it just chlorophyll? We don't know, and we do need to know that before we can actually knowledgeably speak to the question of what the difference is between traditional sieved concentrated trichomes and solvent extracted hash concentrates.
And also, isn't it true that with traditional hash methods you can't get near the level of potency that you do with the I mean, concentrate extracts are pretty high potency, though, at 75%, aren't they? A lot of them.
Yeah, and I don't even know if we have enough real testing data to show if BHO is getting a higher test result than a water extraction of the same, of the same strain. We tried to do some testing involved in a cannabis cookbook last year, and I think Daniel was involved in this, and we all were supposed to get the same product and process it our certain ways, and then we were going to go back and see which one would test the highest. We ended up not having enough of the same product, and everyone got different products, so the whole thing didn't really work out. But I'd love to continue to do those type of research tests.
The other thing is, of course, it depends on what your material is that you're starting out with, as you said. I mean, this is a plant. It's always different, grown under different conditions. The light is different. The air movement's different. The genetics may be the same, but somehow it's expressed differently. So one of the challenges, of course, is consistency, and that's one of the things that people have spoken about since this industry really began, or heck, even when it was Mexican swag coming up in a gas tank. This lid wasn't as good as the last lid. And so we really don't have enough information to really speak knowledgeably to it, and that's one of the other issues. We just need more research.
I think, the idea of how high the THC content is something we should stay away from. If you want straight THC, go get Marinol, and that is nowhere nearly as pleasant or as effective as cannabis. If you've ever tried Marinol, I think it sucks. I never use it, and I love to get high.
That's actually something I wanted to touch on. All of the water hash samples we've been testing lately have had CBD in them, every single one, compared to a lot of BHO. We're seeing, between 2 and 5%, generally speaking, on our concentrates, but we haven't run any high CBD flowers either. But we've been noticing we've been pulling more CBDs out of our water extractions compared to our isopropyl and our butane extractions.
That's interesting. It is same plant? Yeah. Okay, same strain. That's interesting. By the way, the isopropyl, I think I'm concerned about isopropyl alcohol. It's metabolized differently. It's rubbing alcohol. There are all kinds of alcohols. Ethanol is the one that is in Everclear and everything else that's an alcoholic beverage. Don't drink isopropyl alcohol and don't consume it. That does disturb me a bit.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anybody else have any other questions? No? Nobody else has any questions?
I think people just want to go smoke concentrate.
I think everybody just wants to go get dabbed out. Well, all right. Well, then let's just conclude by saying, to dab or not to dab, the answer is dab, but dab responsibly, please, and know what you're getting, where you're getting it from, and please don't make it yourself. Or if you do do it the right way. Do it the safe way. Thank you guys. Thank you to our panel. Let's hear it for the panel,
Actually, the material doesn't matter so much. Like, there's a whole complex biochemistry going on here. Or you could actually multiple levels of regulation, and then make sure you blast into a tray. That's why yeah, for sure. So cold is definitely better. Yeah, for the actual blasting part, because it extracts less from the plant gases and stuff. Extracts less what? People freak out on anything. And they see it happening. I'm dying. You know, they felt their heartbeat for the first time. I'm not saying I'm in there. You know, I would imagine you can shift a person a steady state to a different place that might not be good. A certain heat, right? It's a minimum. If a lot more good, then it was bad. You know, so it's a matter of where to focus. The young high people will focus on the minor bad and ignore the massive good. And that's the problem. Yes, sir. Will you give a card? Yes, your card. I like what you're doing. Thank you very much. Cheers, man. All right, yeah. Well, hello there, John. Hey, Bob. You're going to be here.
Generally speaking, THC levels are higher. Usually VHO is slightly higher all the time. CO2 is slightly higher, very slightly higher. It's only 1%. That's incredible. Just because out here we haven't seen a CO2. Big gut is though, the CO2 is behind all the goals and all the